This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
It is reaction week across the NFL as we enter now week number 2 on the 2022 NFL schedule. And I say reaction, not overreaction, because sometimes you do got to shift pretty quickly to react to what we saw in the opening slate of games. We're going to break things down from a betting perspective for week number 2, talking about this week's biggest games, where we're seeing betting value in them and our favorite bets across the entirety of week number 2. Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonnet. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as I am each Thursday by Ryan Williams. Check out Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Ryan, a successful week 1 for you, as we discussed on Tuesday, recapping last week's action. 3-2 overall, 3-0 on your spread bets last week. So heavy expectations for you this week. How you doing today?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jim. I thought we talked about in the green room, not mentioning that right at the beginning before the picks were made.
Yeah.
No, but it's good, man. I think that we kind of talked about it. This slate is ugly. But I think that, I'm going to botch the saying, but, kind of ugly ducklings, like if you can find the diamonds in the rough or whatever, like you can be profitable this week because there's going to be so much, like you said, overreaction to things that we just saw in week 1. And we see this every year, Jim. I mean, it never fails. Like people say, don't overreact to week 1. And then you have week 1 happen. And now it's like, the sky is falling for half of these teams. I mean, the Green Bay Packers, we saw what happened.
Or I put Saquon Barkley's rushing plus receiving prop at 188, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So this is fun, especially I love weeks like this when the public feels like there's really no good leans on anything. And so we're just going to take favorites blindly. And I think that, there's still some actionable data that we can digest that, will put us on some good games.
Yeah, I think that it is important to react to week 1, as you were alluding to. Like there is some actionable data within that, and it's important to weigh that in. And I think for me, week 2 has always been my favorite week because we actually have data to look at, and we have things that are important to us. We still get those overreactions, but also underreactions. And I'm going to talk to Ryan about how to balance those two things heading into week number 2, what his process is for that, and then break down some big games this week. We will go through Chiefs and Chargers. If you listen to this on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and that game's already happened, we'll stick that at the end of the show. So if you're listening here Thursday, you want to get our thoughts on Chiefs versus Chargers, check out the timestamp in the episode description over on numberFire or in your podcast catcher. I'll put the timestamp for when that discussion begins in there so you can jump ahead, get our thoughts on Chiefs Chargers, and then swing back to hear the rest of the games on the slate for this week. Before we dive into that, though, quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Tomorrow, our player prop betting preview podcast will be posted. Player prop betting preview podcast, a lot of P's in there. That'll be up tomorrow. We also have our week 3 college football betting podcast with Dr. Ed Fang that was posted on Wednesday night, breaking down biggest games of week number 3 in college football. Get that and every other podcast as they're posted by subscribing to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Also, big news, FanDuel has an all-new mobile gaming app, FanDuel Face-Off. FanDuel Face-Off is where you compete in quick, fun games against other real people for real cash. It has all sorts of games you're familiar with, like Home Run Derby, Wheel of Fortune, puzzle and strategy games, Pat McAfee's kicking game, with more on the way. Contests are action-packed and last between 2 to 5 minutes, so you can play on your couch, waiting in line, during a commercial break, wherever and whenever on your schedule. Plus, you can practice for free anytime, whether it be head-to-head, multiplayer, or larger tournaments. FanDuel Face-Off has something for you. Plus, in most contests, you're matched against players of similar skill levels, so you never be totally overmatched, even as a beginner. Face-Off is also tied to your FanDuel account and wallet, so you can easily use your daily fantasy funds or sportsbook winnings in the app. Visit FanDuel.com/faceoff or download the FanDuel Face-Off app in the Apple App Store today to get in the game. Age and location restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See FanDuel.com/faceoff-terms for terms and conditions. So let's start things off here with the key decision-making process for this week, which is how we react to week number 1 without overreacting or underreacting. So Ryan, when you were looking at week 1 and what happened there, how do you balance that? How do you balance taking into account the best data we've got without overweighing it within your decision making?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, where did lines open, looking at the futures and just seeing where week 2 was compared to what we saw last week and how those games played out. I mean, we'll talk about the Commanders and there were some other teams I felt too. We'll talk about Commanders and Lions in that same game. Like things kind of played out very, very differently in that week 1 than we expected. But a lot of injuries, to report. How are the books viewing those and what can we take from actionable data from if this were just a blank canvas, right? And we didn't have week 1 information, like how would we feel about week 2? And then what is that week 1 information kind of helping us to paint the picture? So I feel like I'm still going about it the same way that I went about week 1 and how I felt about these teams in week 1, especially for some of these home teams that we're going to be talking about this week that I feel like are in favorable matchups that the public is not giving them credit for.
Yeah, I think for me, it's looking at the data that stabilizes quickly. If there is data that can stabilize quickly, I want to value that pretty heavily. And that's more, I think, pertinent to player props because most efficiency stats for full teams won't stabilize quickly, but workloads for players in these games, that's where you can kind of find inefficient markets, overreactions, underreactions to stuff like that. So, a player's snap rate, his rushing share, his target share, his route percentage, stuff like that. That stuff stabilizes very quickly, and it is going to be better data for us to dive into. So I want to put a lot of weight in that kind of stuff, put a lot of weight in stuff that stabilizes quickly. When I'm looking at my actual betting model for the spreads and money lines, I know what percentage of that is from week 1, and it's not a big number. So it is factored in there. The week 1 data is in there, but it's less than 10%. So when I'm looking at these numbers and I'm looking at what my numbers say, it's largely still based on the prior I had coming into this year. And based on how week 1 went, I feel pretty good about those. So I'm confident heading into week 2, and we'll see how things go here. So let's start things off here with the Bucs at the Saints. Bucs are 2.5-point favorites on the road in New Orleans. Total here is 44.5. And Jameis Winston limited in practice Wednesday, but it seems like he should be good to go. The Saints rallied to win week 1 against the Falcons. A lot tougher task here against Tom Brady and the Bucs. Tight spread here. Who you got in this one, Ryan?
Yeah, I think for this one, it's tough because I always tend to go the Tampa Bay side, especially when they're under the key number of 3. We just talked about this last week coming to fruition, and that kind of paid off against Dallas. But when you're looking at New Orleans, I mean, Tom Brady has not beaten this team since joining the Bucs in the regular season. I think there's a lot of merit to that. There's not going to be Chris Godwin out there. Mike Evans is dealing with, soft tissue injuries as he is annually every year. So you're looking at like Julio Jones and an injury-riddled Russell Gage going back out there, who we think is healthy now. But you just saw how much this offense, even though they had the game handedly against the Dallas Cowboys, like they did not look like the same offense from 2021. O-line is banged up too for Tampa Bay. So when I'm looking at New Orleans, I'm, interested in the 2.5. I'd be interested to see if something were to change, like if we get Mike Evans fully a go and maybe we get that hook to move to the magic number of 3. I think that's interesting. But also I like the total going under 44.5. I mean, Dennis Allen, the new coach for New Orleans, I think that he's going to have this defense geared ready to go, not ask Jameis to do too much against his former team. We know he has tend to be turnover prone, but they're involving Taysom Hill and they're getting Alvin Kamara the ball, and they have Michael Thomas to kind of stabilize things. There were some deep shots that Jameis took in week 1, but I think for the most part, they're going to say, our defense is our identity and our offense is good enough to compete in games and, see what Tampa Bay can do. But I am interested in the under 44.5, which the public is too, because that number has been bet down.
Yeah, you mentioned Jameis airing it out. You're right. Early on in that game, they were very conservative. Only 1 out of 10 passes for Jameis were 16-plus yards downfield. It's a very low number. League yards around, I think, like somewhere, this is a wide range, 17 and 22%. I actually don't know. It's somewhere around there, though. But he was well below that. Second half, when they were down, had to make up ground, he was Air Jameis again. And that was good, but it also tells me that they don't want that to be their baseline. That is kind of a break glass in case of emergency kind of thing, which would lend itself towards an under here in the situation. You mentioned the Mike Evans injury. He has a calf injury. limited in practice on Wednesday. Julio missed practice with a knee injury. Shocker. I think he's probably okay based on, it seems like it's kind of a veteran kind of day for Julio there. But Donovan Smith, their left tackle, didn't practice with his elbow injury. I think he got like hyperextended on one of those plays. No IR yet for Smith, which is good. But I think Thursday will tell us a lot about this Bucs team in terms of the injury report, because I've got Chris Godwin ruled out in my numbers already. But if I have to add Donovan Smith into that, that's going to hurt things quite a bit. The Saints have injuries of their own too, specifically on defense. A lot of guys banged up there in the secondary. So I think this is one where I have not bet it yet, and I will not bet it. I want to see what the injury report looks like on Thursday before I decide. Because if Julio is out again, if Smith is out again, I might have to downgrade the Bucs even more. I've got this at the Bucs by 3.24 points. So it would lean towards laying the 2.5, but I might have to downgrade them. So for me, it's probably a stay away unless we get really good news on Smith and Julio on Thursday. Let's talk about a game that I think is actually pretty fun, Ryan. That is the Commanders at the Lions. I'm not sure if this is just because like the Lions are the Hard Knocks team. The Commanders are wild. Like they're just an absurd, weird, odd franchise. Right now, it is Detroit minus 1.5. Total is 48.5. The Lions did cover last week, but they had to rally to get there, come from behind in the second half to lose by 3. Commanders rallied to win against the Jaguars. So I want to ask you, the Lions did not win last week, but it's kind of being treated as if it was because things have moved in their favor. Are betting markets now too high on the Fighting Dan Campbells?
I don't think so, Jim.
Okay.
But there are some things that concern me. So I mean, you're looking at 1.5. I mean, this game is essentially a pick 'em, and it's like, oh my gosh, Jared Goff or Carson Wentz. Who do I lean with? I do like the over in this game right now. It is 48.5. It has been bet up significantly. It opened at 44.5. So you can imagine that people are seeing what Detroit did. People are seeing what Washington did, thinking that these offenses can be explosive, and I think so too. I mean, the way that the Detroit Lions defense and secondary has been playing, this is like rinse and repeat. They're allowing rushing yards to running back. We saw Miles Sanders find the end zone in week 1 against this team. That's something that you don't see.
They brought about the Miles Sanders touchdown regression all by themselves.
Exactly. So I think that's interesting. They play a lot of man. I think that if Carson Wentz is showing us that he has the propensity to throw this rock and sling it all over the field, I think that leans to over. Now on the Detroit Lions side of the ball, I do want to see what the injury report comes out closer to the weekend, because their offensive line is heavily banged up. I think Frank Ragnow didn't practice this week. Earlier this week, I think they had another tackle and guard that also were on the DNP list for Wednesday. So if the Lions offensive line is not healthy going against this front seven for the Commanders, that is troublesome to me. So that's something I want to monitor. But when we're looking at the Lions, all they do is cover. They were the best cover team in 2021. They cover in week 1. Now, I will say this is the first time under Dan Campbell that the Lions have been a favorite. So it is interesting to see if they can cover as the favorite here. But I do, at this point in time, I do like the Lions, all things considered. But I will be monitoring the injury report very closely, because that can change a lot of things.
Yeah, Ragnow is banged up going into week 1. He did play every snap, but obviously it seems like it's kind of a situation where he's not healthy despite playing. Decker played every snap too, but he was also out of practice Wednesday. DeAndre Swift missed practice, but it sounds like he said that was kind of maintenance related. So he's probably going to wind up being okay. One other injury I want to mention is Wes Schweitzer on the Washington side of things, one of their guards, because they actually ran the ball pretty well last week with Antonio Gibson, and that could be a concern there. I talked about this on Tuesday, how my numbers liked Washington the money line, and they still do. I think Washington should actually be favored here by a tiny bit. Let's see. I've got this game as being Washington. I should have sorted this. I did not do this ahead of time. I got this by Washington by 1.2 points. Their money line is now plus 108, which means, and I've got their win odds here at 53.7%. So there is a decent edge still in the Washington money line. Hopefully you got it at 118 or whatever it was on Monday. But I do still think there is value there. And I think part of it for me, Ryan, is I know we speak ill of Carson Wentz, and justifiably so. He's earned that. However, it's still an upgrade from Taylor Heineke, adding in Jahan
Agree.
Dotson and a healthy Curtis Samuel. I think those are all impactful. So I'm in a very weird situation where my entire life I have been irrationally high, stupidly high on Jared Goff, and all of a sudden I'm betting against him. It makes me feel odd. I'm not going to lie. My son is being bet against here, but it's a tight one. I think it's going to be a fun game. I'm curious to see if Washington can kind of duplicate that second half magic, but it'll be a fun game, weirdly fun game for sure. So we'll see how that one breaks down. I think that if I were to go with the total, I'd agree with you. Over 48.5 would be the way I would lean there. Let's talk here about the Dolphins at the Ravens, a couple of 1-0 teams. I know it's not the biggest high-flying matchup, but it's kind of fun once again. Ravens -3.5 here. Total's 44.5. We saw the Dolphins play pretty well against the Patriots. They beat them pretty easily back in week 1, but this is a different matchup. Lamar Jackson is different than a Mac Jones with a back injury. So do the Dolphins have the juice to pull off an upset against the Ravens this week?
Oh, Jim, this is another tough one. I said week 2 is a tough week, but okay, so let's go back to 2021. I mean, these two teams faced each other. The Ravens, for all the injuries that were plagued this team in 2021, they were 8-3 going into week 11 against, or I think it was week 11 against this Dolphins team, and they just blitzed the crap out of Lamar Jackson and thus kind of ruined their season. Like, the Ravens were never the same after that. Lamar Jackson has now talked about a year later that, you know, they weren't prepared for that game, and they are now. And I really do think that the Baltimore Ravens try and come out here and like get some revenge on the Dolphins. I think that, you know, we got Mike McDaniel coming in, one of the most, you know, veteran coaches in all of the NFL, and John Harbaugh, and just the way that Baltimore, if they can, you know, get something going with the run game, hopefully we see more designed runs for Lamar Jackson in this game as well. This being at home, all the money's coming in on the under on this game too, under 44.5. I do like the over as well too. And I think that it comes from the Ravens side of the ball. Force Tua to have to throw. Don't let them establish the run with Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds and all those guys there. You know, and interestingly enough, with the over too, Jim, we're looking at a defensive lineman for the Ravens being out, Kyle Fuller, with the ACL injury. So we could see a lot more big passing plays for Miami if Baltimore can put up an early lead.
I fully agree. In the over, I did bet that over 44.5 myself as well. If I look at like my numbers in terms of projected offensive efficiency, this game should probably have a total of around like 47-ish or so, and it's at 44.5. So, and I don't have an actual like model for projecting totals. I want to be fully clear on that. I will bet them based on what my numbers say, but I want to be clear, I don't have a model for this. But I think the over 44.5 that's the only total I feel good about this week, to be fully honest. I get a little bit uncomfy with totals since I don't have my own model for those. But over 44.5 does seem to be the way I'd want to go here, given this Ravens defense. You know, they were solid last week, but against Joe Flacco, I know we can talk trash on Tua all we want, but he's better than Flacco. And these receivers are better than a pretty solid receiver core for the Jets as well. So to me, I think it does bode well for an over here. A couple injuries to watch in this game as well. Right now, J.K. Dobbins, I think he might go. It kind of sounded like he wasn't going to play based on Lamar last week saying, we hope he get him back in a couple weeks, but full practice for Dobbins on Wednesday. That's pretty encouraging. Ronnie Stanley got into limited practice on Wednesday. Unsure if he'll go. We also had Marcus Peters getting limited practice. Both those guys sat last week. I'm not sure if they'll play. You know, we'll see on that one to see if they're able to go here. On the Dolphins side, I actually am showing value on the Dolphins money line here to potentially win this game. I've got their win odds around 48%, which feels a little high, but it's in part because my numbers like situations for quarterbacks a lot surrounding context, and it's a pretty good surrounding context for Tua. The reason I'm not recommending the money line as of now is because of the Dolphins' injuries. Both their tackles are banged up right now. I'm not really sure what Teron Armstead's deal is because he was listed as having a veteran rest day on Wednesday, but also had a toe injury. So is it rest or is it a toe injury? I don't know. I'm very confused about this. It's a very odd injury
because of the toe injury.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know what this is. But also the right tackle Austin Jackson is practice Wednesday. That one I know it's to his blind side, but he's not as big of a difference maker as Armstead is. So I'm mostly watching Armstead. I could see myself being in on the money line here. The Dolphins money line currently plus 160. I could see myself buying there. I'm not there yet. I want to see, similar to the Bucs Saints game, I want to see what the injury report looks like on Thursday. If they get Armstead back out there, maybe I will. But the one bet I do like in this game is one where I'm in lockstep with Ryan on the over at 44.5. Let's open up the board here, Ryan. We'll talk about Chiefs Chargers in just one segment. Any other bets standing out to you across week 2 in the NFL?
Yeah, I do want to, dive in a little bit more to the slate as we do this early on the week. But the one that stuck out to me the most was the Jaguars plus 4.5. Going against Indy. I mean, I talked about Indy last week. So does it make me feel comfortable going against Indy 2 weeks in a row? Probably not, but let's do it again because Jacksonville straight up against Indy is 6-0 over the past 6 matchups. I mean, this is one of those things where Jacksonville has just had their number for whatever it's worth. We kind of just saw that last year with playing spoiler to Carson Wentz and company. This Jacksonville Jaguars defense, I think, is a lot better than people want to give it credit for. I think that Trevor Lawrence, is hitting a stride with his newly found weapon in Christian Kirk. That's going to help them a lot. And just the way that Indy kind of, playing disappointingly against the Houston Texans and now, having to go up against another divisional opponent, it just leans merit to taking the Jaguars at plus 4.5. Jim, I mean, that number, I was like, maybe 3.5 is what we'll get, but it opened that way, and now it just keeps going back to 4.5.
Let me ask you this: can I interest you in the money line? Can I get a Jags win out here, or is that too far?
No, I mean, the numbers are saying that like you should take that.
My numbers are saying that. I know that. I bet it earlier on this week. I don't remember betting the Jags, but I was looking back through my logs and I was like, oh, I bet the Jags money line. I don't remember this. It must have been like Monday.
What did you get it at?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll pull it up here, but I have to remember which app it was on because I think it was when I was in Illinois still. But I did bet it. I don't remember doing this, so I'm very curious what number I got it at.
Yeah, I'd be curious too, because I think they're plus 164 now on our book.
I think the reason I bet it is I was looking at the week 1 data and saw how pass happy the Jags were. And I was just like, this is fun. I'm going to bet the Jags and I bet on Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if it was like my numbers don't show value on it right now, but like they show a little bit of value. Must have been. Yeah, it wasn't at Rhode Island Sportsbook, so I'll find it somewhere else.
No,
but I did that when I was in Illinois. This is definitely a Monday bet, and I don't think my numbers show value on it now. But like they look good, honestly. I know Lawrence had some weird passes, but I kind of think the Jags are gonna be fun this year. Like they might not be great, but I think they'll be fun.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this at FanFest. Like they were my long shot to kind of make the playoffs. If Lawrence can, ride the ship, how much I favor good quarterbacks when I'm doing my process. And so I just think, getting rid of Urban Meyer and getting Doug Peterson in there, who had some success where he's been at, holds merit. Now, the other thing, Jim, real quickly, that's just interesting about this, too, when we're talking about injury reports. Okay, so Alec Pierce is in concussion protocol. He could clear that. Let's kind of monitor that and see what happens. Also, Michael Pittman all of a sudden just ended up on the injury report. Now, I think it was in a limited nature, but I just thought that was interesting because I don't remember anything being talked about him having a significant injury. And I'll disclaimer, did not watch that game or look back at that game. So I don't know if there's anything that happened that he left the game for a little bit, came back in or what have you. But I thought those two things were interesting, and that would drastically change things for the Indy side of things if these two guys aren't able to go. Alec Pierce, I know he's a rookie, but for whatever it's worth, another weapon for Matt Ryan to use.
It was a Tuesday. I missed it. It was actually here in Rhode Island. So it was a Tuesday, 8:08 a.m. I placed it. It was the Jags plus 170 in the money line. So it hasn't moved very much since then, but I think the Jags are a little frisky. So I'm still okay with that one right now. I think we'll see the Jags. We'll see what they can do there, but they're kind of fun. Any other stuff standing out for you before we get to the Chiefs Chargers game?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to kind of, it pains me to say it, but, looking at the kind of Patriot side of thing, although they are traveling into Pittsburgh, but just the way that Belichick's numbers compared to Tomlin's numbers, against the spread, Belichick, we're looking at 25-3 against the spread after a loss as a road dog or a favorite under a touchdown. And we kind of know what Bill Belichick's MO is, right? He loves to rebound in games. And then Tomlin is 1-7 against the spread after winning straight up as a road dog over the past 4 years. So, that I love the Steelers, but those numbers are showing me enough data that there could be some value there in taking the Patriots as a road favorite, albeit they are a short favorite. And then also just, if you're looking at the Green Bay and Bears game, Rodgers against the Bears has always, been good money.
I own you.
Yeah. 9-0 against the spread after a loss, 28-8 against the spread, and the Bears in his career 19-9 straight up. I mean, it's just, it's week 2 after a loss going against the Bears. When they, we'll see who the Bears are, right? Because it's not going to be a weird field condition type of thing. You got to travel up to Lambeau. I do like my numbers that I got on the Bears win totals for this season, just compared to how they played that game and what Matt Eberflus, I think, brings to this team. I think they'll be in more games than not, excuse me. But I do think that, if you're looking at something that's a surefire, you want to take an eliminator or a survivor pick, you're looking at the Packers there.
Yeah, the Bears are kind of chaos team in a good way. They know that they're not great. They're going to keep things muddy. They're going to keep things gross. They're going to keep things chaotic. And I think that's the way to play things with the talent on their roster. So I think that the win totals you're talking about do make a lot of sense. Okay, that's all we have for the non-Thursday games. If you listen to this on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down the player prop side of things. But let's get to what everyone's been waiting for. The Chargers at the Chiefs. The Chiefs 4.5-point favorites in this game. Total right now is up at 53.5. Ryan, what are you seeing here in this fun Thursday night matchup?
Yeah, so let's talk about the Chargers side of things. I mean, okay, they are traveling into Arrowhead to Kansas City, but getting 4.5 here is just, this is ridiculous, Jim. Like, the Chargers, and they're my Super Bowl picks. So, I mean, maybe I'm betting more of my heart than my head, but even my head, talking about how these two teams have played. I mean, Herbert's first start in his career was against this team and being able to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And when you're looking at, three of the past 4 games have, hit over what the total is of 53.5. I absolutely love that number. I think there's definitely some merit to taking some good prop bets in this game on Herbert and Patrick Mahomes touchdowns and things like that. But definitely the lean on the Chargers plus 4.5. They have not they've won, I believe, 3 out of the 4 matchups, and then the only loss came in overtime to the Chiefs last year, which they lost by 6, but that's the only time they've lost.
That was a Kelsey weird yak touchdown that he had.
Exactly. So, I mean, just looking at that number when we're getting 4 in the hook on the road, I mean, if they can, but Butker's out too, Jim. Butker's out, the kicker.
That does impact things quite a bit. I know they did promote a kicker from the practice squad, but it kind of softens key numbers in a way. So I think maybe if you're looking, it could incentivize you to look towards an alternate spread too. Maybe getting the Chargers +3 if you want to, play with the fact that this is less of a key number than it usually would be. I think that it actually does impact things.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I always love looking at alt lines, especially if you can get it in your favor and plus money, talking yourself into the narrative. So I am interested in that. I know you guys will talk about player props, but I do, Josh Palmer, I think, is going to be a key factor in this game. I think he has to be, with Keenan Allen being sidelined, and he filled in nicely towards the end of last year in the last 5-6 games for this team when Mike Williams was kind of dealing with some stuff and Keenan Allen was dealing with some stuff. Every time his prop total right now, I think, is at over 46.5 or 45.5 was the last I checked it. And every time he was hitting over this number last year, this guy was scoring a touchdown. So, I mean, that, there's some interesting merit, I feel like, for Josh Palmer as well.
Yeah, Josh Palmer plus 270 for an anytime touchdown as well, which I think is intriguing given that he does have a decent body type for the end zone. We expect the Chargers to score a lot of points. My numbers agree with you. Chargers plus 4.5. The way I'd want to go here, I'm not betting that because I have a downgrade in there for Keenan Allen. That makes it the Chiefs by 3.7. I typically want more than 0.8 points to dive in, but definitely does go the Chargers' direction in terms of if I were to bet that. Also, some value in the Chargers money line at plus 176. Not enough for me to bite, but it is an undervalued number for me in both regards. The one prop I like in this game a lot, the one prop I think is valuable, I don't like it, it makes me very uncomfy, is Austin Eckler under 97.5 rushing plus receiving yards. The reason I'm uncomfy, if we can use that word, is the Keenan Allen injury. I'm not sure what kind of passing game work Eckler will get with Keenan Allen being out for this game. It could just be a spike in usage there for Eckler. But in week 1, he ran 12 routes on 34 dropbacks. Super disappointing there. He played about 51% of the snaps. And the obvious rebuttal is, well, they were game planning around the Thursday game, keeping him fresh. Totally makes sense. But his yardage, like average last year in games where he played a full complement of snaps, is 98.5, around there, which means his median would have been below that. That's typically the way things go for guys like this. And basically what you're saying is that the Keenan Allen injury nullifies the reduction in his role. A reduction in the role they talked about in the offseason. So it doesn't make me feel good to go under 97.5, given that we have the Keenan Allen injury. It makes me a little bit nervous. Maybe you want to go towards the rushing number for Eckler instead. His rushing prop is currently 53.5, minus 113 on the under. I do want the multiple paths to an under, though, and I do want to take advantage of the fact that he didn't run a lot of routes in week number 1. So I'll take the rushing plus receiving under 97.5. I think that's where I want to go. Any thoughts on Eckler for you, Ryan, or any other props you want to shout out in this game?
Yeah, I think that I do think that there's some merit there, Jim, but just the way that the Chiefs defense has done against running backs, I mean, my game plan against them, if I was Staley and company, would be Eckler needs to be involved in this game if they want to have any chance. So yeah, if I'm taking the plus 4.5, I gotta feel like Eckler's going to be involved, especially with no Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Like Mike Williams is the Jekyll and Hyde of all receivers. You never know what you're going to get from him. He goes out and he'll have 12 yards, and now he'll have 2 touchdowns and $130 against the Chiefs, just because that's how he performs. But yeah, I would probably, I mean, the over on that number, it is probably one that I would maybe stray away from, but I am interested in his over 39.5 receiving yards for Eckler. So that's that. The other one is just the Patrick Mahomes. I talked about his touchdowns, over 2.5 right now. It was plus money the last time I checked. If it is, I think you should jump on that. For the past 4 home openers for Patrick Mahomes, he's thrown 3 touchdowns in each one of those games. This guy's just explosive at home and in front of that crowd. We know that he loves to pass the ball, and we saw them play running back roulette last week, as the Chiefs usually do. So look for him to hit that number.
It's plus 114 right now, over 2.5 touchdowns. I think that makes sense, given that we expect this game to go over the total. Chargers pass defense. JC Jackson might play limited in practice on Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll see if that one goes, but it's Mahomes, baby. It's Thursday night. It's going to be a blast of a game. I am looking forward to sitting back and watching that one tonight. That is all that we have here for today on the Week 2 Betting Preview Podcast here on Covering the Spread. As mentioned, we'll be back on Friday to talk about some player props for this weekend's game. So hit subscribe on Covering the Spread to get that, and also check out our college football Week 3 betting podcast with Ed Fang. Ryan, we can find you on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. Good luck to you this week. It was a blast having you on, and look forward to talking to you once again on Monday to preview 2 Monday Night Football games. That's right. Good luck to you as well, my fine sir, and make sure you're going out there and getting that money where it can be had. But yeah, always a pleasure, Jim. I'll catch you next time, buddy. Fingers crossed on the money side of things. We'll see about that for sure. Again, follow Ryan on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. I'm on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets for Thursday night and the rest of this weekend. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down some props. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.